Brother made my life hell, then got my wife pregnant. Now he wants my help after our parents disowned him and left me their $2 million inheritance. My younger brother, David, always held a deep grudge against me. If you think it was jealousy, you'd be wrong. He was the favorite, not me. There was no reason for him to be jealous. Let me explain. Our mom always spoiled David. He was her golden child. She cooked for him, did his laundry, and even told me to help him with homework. I was supposed to help him just because we were family, but I never got the same treatment. I accepted it, since I was pretty independent. Maybe it was my fault for always helping him and expecting nothing back. He never helped me, only ever came to me when he wanted something. I was a quiet, introverted kid who liked studying and being alone. He was loud and rough, just like our dad. I'm also very straightforward and honest. I never sugarcoat things. I think my mom started to see me in a negative light because of my bluntness. This favoritism made David the family darling, and I didn't mind it when we were kids. But trouble started when he began bullying me for being different. He'd tease me about my height and my glasses. He'd sneak into my room, read my diary, and then tell our mom what I wrote. When I yelled at him for invading my privacy, my parents just laughed it off. He did worse things, like almost breaking my glasses and putting gross stuff in my food. He once put little stones in my cereal, but I found them before they could hurt my teeth. When I told my mom, she dismissed it, saying this is how brothers bond. When we fought, David would target my insecurities. We went to the same school, so he knew I was being bullied. Instead of helping me, he joined in, calling me names like ugly loser or hairy monkey, and telling them to hit me, saying I was just a big failure. Another time, during a fight I can't even remember, he told me to kill myself. I could brush off most insults, but that one really hurt because I was struggling with my mental health back then. I'm better now, but it was devastating to hear my own brother say that. Since Dad was often at work and Mom didn't seem to care, she even scolded me once, saying it was my fault for irritating him. Things got worse in high school. There was a shocking incident where David tried to set my hair on fire. Unbelievably, our mother defended him, saying he was just playing. Seriously, who does that? Thankfully, my dad finally stepped in and saw how serious it was. He even threatened to call the police on David. This was a real wake-up call for my brother, who had never faced consequences before. He was stunned. Dad said enough was enough and David needed to respect me. Later, Dad came to my room to talk. I never expected his support because he always said how similar he and David were, which was true. Dad admitted he'd waited for years, hoping David would grow up, but now saw he was just a bully. Hearing that from my dad was incredibly validating, and I almost broke down. I told him everything David had done, even about the school bullying. Dad was shocked I'd endured so much. The next day, he spoke to the principal to warn the bullies. That evening, Dad enrolled me in MMA classes at a local gym, telling me I needed to man up and stand up to bullies. A nerdy kid like me learning to fight might seem funny, but I was focused. I balanced my studies and workouts, and MMA totally changed my life and body. One day, David was at it again. He stole my pocket money, which I'd saved from doing chores. He snuck into my room and took it. I caught him as he was about to cycle off with his friends. I demanded my money back, but David mocked me, saying all I could do was run to Daddy. I don't know what came over me, but I punched him in the face. He fell back, stunned, and I took my money from his pocket. David started crying loudly, which was pretty funny. My mom rushed out to help him. When she learned I'd fought him, she was surprised and scolded me, saying I should be a better role model for David, who seemed to enjoy seeing me get in trouble. Mom also complained to my dad. Dad grimly asked us both to explain. I told him how David had stolen my hard-saved money. David tried to justify it, saying he needed it for a date and that I should help him as his brother. But Dad told David he was lucky I only punched him, because anyone else would have called the police for stealing. He said David had no right to take things without permission. David didn't like that and threw a tantrum, hoping Mom would take his side, but Dad stood firm. When David realized he wouldn't be punished for getting hit, he screamed that he hated me and ran to his room, locking himself in. After that, David started to distance himself. He finally understood he couldn't bully me anymore and that even Dad had stopped supporting his antics. For the first time in a long while, I felt we were equals. Though he couldn't physically hurt me, he still threw verbal insults when our parents weren't around. His behavior got worse as he got older, becoming angrier and more short-tempered each year. When I tried to talk to him, he'd ignore me and walk away, muttering "nerd" or "loser" under his breath. If he needed to tell me something, he'd go through our mom instead of talking to me directly. When I asked her why, she'd just tell me to be more understanding. I didn't know if it was just puberty or real hatred. Over time, his comments became unbearable, and I just wanted to move out. I kept asking my mom to help us talk it out, but she always refused, saying she didn't want to get involved. When I asked her why David treated me this way, she'd brush me off. Eventually, I left for my dream university on a scholarship as a top student. My dad threw me a party, and even my mom seemed proud. But David stayed cold and distant, barely acknowledging my achievement. The day I left for university was a mix of excitement for the future and relief to be free from that toxic home. The first few months at university were amazing. I made new friends, loved my classes, and started building a life away from the oppression. The constant fear of David's attacks was gone, and I found a new peace. In my second year, I met my wife, Karen, at a frat party through a friend. We clicked instantly. Coming from a religious background, having kids outside of marriage was frowned upon. So when we found out she was pregnant in our final year, we decided to marry right after graduation. Our wedding was small but happy. Our parents were thrilled for us, and we enjoyed the celebration. At that moment, I believed Karen was the love of my life. I'd always wanted a monogamous relationship, one woman to come home to and share my life with. Even when other women showed interest over the years, I never pursued them because I was genuinely happy in my marriage. Karen was my dream girl, and I never wanted to hurt her. But I later found out about 2 times she was unfaithful. One was an on and off affair with a married coworker that lasted years. The other was a brief fling with an ex-boyfriend when she visited her family. Some might think I was naive, and looking back, I can't completely disagree. Each time, we separated for a while, but I chose to forgive her. I didn't want to raise our child in a broken home and believed we could work through it. The affair with her coworker happened when we were young, and I chalked it up to youthful mistakes. For a while, things seemed better, though I could never fully trust her again. I tried to put my doubts aside, knowing that if I forgave her, I had to really try for a fresh start. It's been 4 years since her second betrayal, and I felt confident in my decision to give her another chance. Karen seemed to have changed, and we were genuinely happy, planning our family's future. But 3 months ago, my world shattered again when she revealed she'd been having a long-term affair and that our son might not be mine. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I was overwhelmed with shock, betrayal, and disbelief. I struggled to understand her confession. After a few days, I managed to ask why she'd kept such a huge secret and how she could do something so devastating. Her reaction was cold and indifferent, like she was detached from the pain she caused. Her vague answers left me with more questions. It was a surreal and painful moment, facing the shattered trust and uncertainty about my own family. I kept pressing Karen for the truth because I felt I deserved to know who the father of the child I'd been raising was. Finally, she admitted it was David. My eyes widened in shock as I asked her what she meant. She explained that she and David had become friends when I introduced her to my family. She stayed with us from Thanksgiving until New Year's. David, who was usually cold to me, was warm and polite to her, which made me glad because I didn't want Karen to feel unwelcome. Karen wanted to be accepted into my family, so she spent a lot of time with my mom. She noticed the rift between David and me and asked me about it. I opened up about our strained relationship, explaining we might never fix it because of his unresolved issues. Karen understood but started including David in our outings, hoping it would help us bond. If we planned to watch a movie, she'd invite David, and we'd watch whatever he picked. During this time, David and I exchanged a few words, which was an improvement over his usual silent treatment. I remember Karen and David hanging out, playing video games together, but I never thought much of it. Karen told me that one day David opened up to her about his struggles after a recent breakup. Feeling vulnerable, he started a friendship with her. She mentioned he would harmlessly flirt with her when I wasn't around, and eventually, things got out of hand. The image of my wife and brother together made me feel sick. Karen confessed she felt guilty afterward and left him, which matched her sudden decision to go home instead of spending New Year's with me. I tried to convince her to stay, but she was adamant. When we met back at college after the holidays, she was her usual cheerful self, so I didn't question anything. 2 weeks later, we found out she was pregnant. Karen admitted she didn't know if the child was mine or David's, and with no way to prove it, she chose to stay with me, knowing I was the more dependable brother. That's why we got married. My world felt like it was crashing down. The son I loved might not even be mine. I asked Karen if she'd been sleeping with David recently, and she slowly nodded. She revealed they'd always stayed in touch because their chemistry was undeniable. They'd sneak off to hotels, lying to me about working overtime. She admitted half her business trips were actually romantic getaways with him. I asked why she married me if she wanted my brother, and Karen said she didn't want to be the one to break off the marriage. She saw me as a wonderful father to our son and decided to stay. In her words, she made a mistake and didn't know when to stop. I told Karen I was glad she told me the truth, but that I was going to pack up and leave. She started crying, asking for forgiveness, and expected me to yell at her. Instead, I calmly packed my clothes. Karen insisted that if I loved her, I should fight for her, and that mistakes happen in every marriage. When she realized I wasn't going to do anything, she changed her approach, saying our son would be affected by a divorce and that children shouldn't be raised in broken homes. I reminded her that I might not even be the father, which made her cry more and accuse me of being cruel. It seemed like she believed nothing could make me leave the marriage. Maybe it was partly my fault for letting things slide in the past. While I did love her, it felt more like it was because I thought we had a son together and had been together since college. Karen kept insisting it wasn't too late to fix things, but I struggled to believe her and had no patience left. Trust was a major issue, and her words felt hollow. Even if I forgave her, I could never forget she slept with my brother. I've always believed in forgiving mistakes because we're all flawed, but this was way beyond acceptable limits. I left her crying on the doorstep and checked into a hotel. The next day, I went straight to my parents and revealed everything about my wife's affair with David, explaining how they'd been secretly sleeping together for years. The shock on their faces was undeniable. True to her nature, my mother initially tried to defend David, insisting her boy could never do such a thing to his own brother. Determined to expose the truth, I asked my parents to stay quiet and let me call David in front of them. I told them not to say anything so I could catch David off guard, making him think it was a private conversation. When David answered the phone, I confronted him about the affair. At first, he vehemently denied it, refusing to accept any responsibility. But when I told him Karen had admitted to everything, he started blaming her, calling her characterless. He claimed it wasn't his fault if women were attracted to him and that he was the better-looking brother. I told him firmly that I would expose him to everyone. When David mocked me, saying no one would believe me because he was the golden child, I scoffed at his arrogance and thanked him for confirming the truth, knowing our parents had heard everything. David went quiet and then spluttered, trying to explain himself and salvage his image. My mother, still in shock, demanded an explanation from David. He stuttered through a weak attempt to justify his actions, blaming everyone else but himself and desperately trying to shift the blame onto Karen. I could see my mother, who had always protected her favored son, now felt a mix of disappointment and anger. In that charged moment, I felt a strange sense of vindication. For years, I had endured David's torment. Now the truth was out, and the roles were reversed. It was David who stood exposed, his actions laid bare for everyone to see. As David's words faltered, my father, who is usually reserved, couldn't hide his disappointment. He asked me to pass him the phone and began to speak to David. "David," my father began, his voice heavy with disappointment, "what you've done isn't just a betrayal of your brother, it's a betrayal of this family. You slept with your brother's wife and continued the affair even after they were married. Your actions have severe consequences and have shattered the trust we had in you. I raised both of you to value family loyalty and decency. What you've shown today defies everything I've tried to teach you." He paused, letting his words sink into David's conscience. "Your disregard for your brother's feelings and the lack of respect for his marriage are unacceptable. You've not only hurt him but also torn apart the bonds that hold our family together. Your mother and I are partly to blame for what you've become, but we will no longer tolerate this behavior. From today, you're cut off from the college funds I set up for you. You'll have to figure out how to pay your university fees on your own. I will also stop funding your lifestyle. Do you think it makes you more of a man to sleep with married women? Let's see how you manage without my money." Throughout this, I stayed calm, though I initially wanted to scream at David. Watching my dad punish him was the ultimate vindication. I had exposed his true nature, and it was clear he had underestimated the consequences. My mother, despite David's persistent protests, kept trying to justify him, but my father quickly ended the call, shutting down David's excuses. Afterward, my mom came over and hugged me. It had been a long time since we'd shared a moment like that, but in that embrace, there was an unspoken understanding and support amid the family chaos. She apologized for not believing me all this time. My 14-year-old self could never have imagined this moment, being vindicated and embraced by my mother. Following this, my dad helped me find a good lawyer to divorce Karen. She and her lawyer fought dirty, asking for alimony since I earned more, but her affair worked heavily in my favor. We also did a paternity test, and it confirmed that David was the father. The news was incredibly painful, even worse than discovering Karen's infidelity. I was furious that the son I had loved and raised wasn't mine. But I decided to stay strong. Karen begged me to keep visiting my son, arguing he shouldn't be punished for the situation, but I couldn't bear to see him. He reminded me too much of David, and I hated it. After my divorce was finalized, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me as I moved into my own bachelor pad. It felt surreal to live alone since I had married so young and never really had the chance to experience independence. But my naturally independent nature helped me adapt quickly, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. 2 weeks ago, my dad called to say he was considering changing his will because he didn't want to leave anything to David. My dad is incredibly stubborn, and once he decided to cut David out, he stuck to it. David tried reaching out to our parents and even showed up at their doorstep, begging for forgiveness, but they refused to let him in. Even my mother, who usually gave in to David's tantrums, seemed done with him, though it must have been hardest for her. David never texted me to apologize for what he'd done, showing he didn't regret his actions. He was just upset about being cut off. Dad told me he planned to leave everything to me, making sure David couldn't contest it later. He would leave David only $1. My eyes widened in shock. My dad had worked hard his entire life. His assets, retirement fund, and life insurance totaled nearly $2 million. The only condition was that if my dad passed away before my mom, she could continue living in their house, even though ownership would transfer to me. I didn't mind this, as I wanted to care for my mom in her final days. Somehow, David found out about this and, unable to reach our parents, called me yesterday, trying to make amends. He explained he was struggling with college and that after Karen discovered the paternity, she'd been pestering him for child support. He said he had no money and was looking for part-time jobs but couldn't find anything. He begged me to talk to our family, to start fresh, since he really needed my help. I laughed in his face and told him I was done with him. I reminded him he should have thought about the consequences before sleeping with my wife and getting her pregnant. David argued that I was being unfair and that Karen was also to blame. I agreed, but I reminded him I had divorced her, making her his responsibility now. He shouldn't be calling me to complain about her or the child, since these were the consequences of his own actions. David started to raise his voice, but I interrupted, reminding him he was no longer the favored child but the black sheep who had slept with his own brother's wife. At that moment, David began to cry, telling me how everyone, including our grandparents and relatives, had turned against him. While this was true, it was no longer my concern. I told him we were done and that he should never call me again, since I no longer considered him my brother. Since then, I've replayed the conversation in my mind. Despite my hatred for my brother, I had never heard him cry, at least not since we were kids. I won't lie, it did hurt me a bit to see him so helpless. So I guess I'm here to ask if I should talk to our parents about him, or if I would be an idiot if I don't. Update 1. Hi everyone. Many of you have been asking why I'm no longer in contact with my son, Henry, and some have even called me cruel. I need to explain that I am not comfortable raising another man's child. This isn't a stepson situation. I was led to believe Henry was my son, only to later discover he is actually my brother David's son. Naturally, this revelation hurt deeply, and I cried over it for days. The main reason I don't want any contact with Henry is that I no longer want Karen in my life. If I stay connected to her child, she will find a way back into my life, and I need my space. You may think I'm cruel or selfish, but I can't see him ever again, at least not for a very long time. Update 2. Most of you correctly guessed that it was my mother who told David about my dad changing his will, which led David to call me as a last resort to fix things. I confronted her in front of my dad, and she broke down, saying I had punished David enough and that he had learned his lesson. My dad firmly told my mother that if she believed what David did was forgivable, then he could no longer stay married to her, because he could never forgive such a betrayal. This threat silenced my mother. My dad made it clear that if she ever talked with David again and we found out, she could pack her bags and leave. As I mentioned, my dad is very stubborn. Hopefully, my mother will learn from her mistakes. Update 3. Reddit. It's been 5 months since my last update. My relationship with my parents has improved over the past few months. My dad and I go golfing every weekend, and he treats me more like a buddy than a son. Although my mother misses David, she has stayed away from him. The last I heard about David was from my cousin, who said David had been asking everyone for money and eventually had to drop out of college because he couldn't afford the fees. He and Karen are living together, and he has a part-time job as a mechanic. Apparently, they are raising Henry together, which is a good thing, I guess. I never discuss David with my parents, and they don't bring him up either. For everyone asking, I am doing quite well. I was promoted at my job 2 months ago, so my salary has significantly improved. I haven't been dating anyone, as I feel I still need time and space to heal. I've been going to therapy, so we'll see how that works out. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.